Welcome back. Well, ethnic tensions are not new to Malaysia, but they have remained dormant for decades. Well, until now, that is. Together, Chinese and Indians make up a third of Malaysia's 26 million people, as well as playing an important role in the country's economy. But for the first time, they voted against the ruling party in droves. They increasingly resent the decades-old policy that gives preferences to Malays in education, housing and jobs. And last November, an estimated 20,000 ethnic Indians took to the streets in protest. They brought Kuala Lumpur to a standstill, but perhaps the police's response is even more telling. They reacted forcefully using tear gas, water cannons and batons to break up the protest. Well, hundreds of protesters were detained. For many, it ignited memories of the race riots that struck the island back in 1969. We're still joined by our guests in Kuala Lumpur, Mavis Buto-Cherry, Senior Associate Fellow of the Institute of Malaysian and International Studies. Also in Kuala Lumpur, Tricia Yeo, Senior Research Analyst at the Centre for Public Policy Studies. And in Jakarta, columnist and author Karim Raslan. If I could start with Tricia Yeo this time. How important was the minority ethnic vote to the election result?
Extremely important. You've hit the nail on its head when you say that the minority ethnic group contributed a lot to the swing in these elections. Let's look at a bit of statistics for a bit. We look at the Indian and the Chinese swing. These are just basic rough estimates at the moment, but you see a 35% swing of the Indians against the Barisan National Government, 30% of the Chinese against the government, and a 5% swing of the Malays against the government. Now, it's obvious that in the seats in which the Indians and the Chinese constituted the majority, those were the seats that obviously fell to the opposition. But if you look at how important the Malay votes were in determining the result, was that traditionally the Malays have always been touted as in support of the Barisan National Government. And as urbanization took place, more and more Malays came into the urban cities, thereby resulting in more mixed seats, which historically have been to the favor of the Barisan National Government. But this time, why has there been this 5% swing towards the opposition? One could say that these are the urban Malays which are increasingly educated and informed, therefore knowing more about cases of corruption, rising crime rates, inflation, and not forgetting the very important fourth factor, which is how Anwar has successfully propagated a policy that is not ethnically based, an affirmative action policy that is needs-based, which, if one were to examine closer, perhaps shows that the urban Malays are becoming more willing to let go of their NEP, affirmative action policy, in favor of one that is more equitable for all Malaysians alike. And so I would say it is the urban Malay which has caused some swing in the votes in Perak, Selangor, which are the more urban states of the country.
Well, that's some food for thought there. Let's pick up that point with Karim Raslan. A swing in thinking amongst the Malay majority towards equity rather than a racially based system?
I think Tricia is right there. The Malay swing is very important to stress because it isn't a kind of racially divisive election. Basically, it is across all Malaysians. There is a sense of frustration. Malays as well in the urban areas have voted clearly for the opposition. However, I think it's important to bear in mind that the Barisan Nasional remains a kind of formidable competitor. It's a tough winning machine, and even now they'll be trying to figure out, well, how do we win back these votes? So I think it's not
game over yet.
Certainly politics has changed, but it's not over yet. There are certain voices within the Barisan which are saying, look, we cannot give up now. We've got to try and reinvent ourselves and address these issues of social equity in a way that doesn't leave behind the small man.
But
the class element of what's going on has been forgotten.
Is it game over for the sort of race-based coalition system of the ruling party? Are there voices in there saying maybe it's time to reflect that approach?
Oh no, definitely there are voices reflecting on this. However, the reality of multiracial Malaysia is such that whoever takes over and governs in Selangor or Perak has to deal with very, very difficult issues and places of worship, in conversion from people from Islam to other religions, and these will prove to be very divisive. Whoever is in charge will find these to be the key issues that pull us apart coalitions. So I'm not sure that the coalition that we do have on the opposition between PAS, the Democratic Action Party, and Keadilan are necessarily totally prepared for the realities of multiracial Malaysia. These, they have to be tested on.
Right, Mavis Bhutto Cherry, we often, the international media often talks about Malaysian politics in terms of the ethnic divide. Do you think that term can sometimes be misleading? Are we really witnessing a rebellion of the have-nots against the haves, regardless of race and religion?
Yes, I agree. Excuse me. The whole, if you look at the election results, you will see that actually it is not true that Parliament is polarized. There is a tendency to assume that Malays voted for the party in power, for the government, and the opposition voted for, the non-Malays voted for the opposition. But that is not true. I did a quick study of the opposition MPs, and I found that actually they represented the racial proportions in of the population as a whole. So in a way, the opposition has produced a much more balanced representation in Parliament than the BN has. So I do not think that ethnic politics is something that we have to live with all our life. I think it is being muted now by other more important factors. The whole question of equity, the question of citizenship, and the rights of every citizen to be treated equally as citizens. These are important issues now that have come to the fore, and it has been part of our democratization process. Civil society is now playing a much more important role than it has ever played in the past.
All right, perhaps amongst
I think these are important factors.
Amongst perhaps those important issues and factors too, Tricia Yeo, is regionalism one of those important factors? The idea of the Peninsula versus Sabah and Sarawak?
Well, Sabah and Sarawak are actually playing with very different issues from what we are in Peninsula Malaysia dealing with. So in Sabah and Sarawak, you have issues of the native customary land rights, the issue of non-registration of identity cards and non-citizenship in Sabah. The issues that we are looking at in Peninsula Malaysia seem to be more politically heightened, and if you look at the results, it actually does show that less than 50% of the Peninsula Malaysians gave the popular vote to the Barisan Nasional.
Okay, Karim Raslan, I think reflecting on what has just happened, Abdullah Ahmed Badawi's priorities for now, what do you think is going to be his main priority to try and perhaps lick some of those wounds inflicted?
Well, I think clearly the most important thing is to gather around the Barisan Nasional and UMNO and to determine what were the causes of the defeat, to be totally honest about them, and then to address those causes. There is no room for them to pretend that the country's political dynamic has not changed. They've got to face square what has happened, and this is going to be a major challenge for Malaysia and for the ruling party, because they've never had to face this. This is 50 years on. So in many ways, for a lot of Malaysians, we are very, very excited by the prospect, and that's why there's no trouble in the streets. The coalition on the opposition side has come in Selangor, they're going to come in Perak, Kedah, and Penang. A lot of Malaysians are saying, we're happy to have you on board, but if you screw up, we're going to elect you out.
Well, we're happy to have our guests on board too on this show, but time is running out. We'll have to thank them. Mavis Bhutto Cherry from the Institute of Malaysian International Studies, and Tricia Yeo for the Centre for Public Policy Studies, and Karim Raslan, a columnist and author. Thank you all for being with us. And thank you for joining us here in this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. Email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, it's goodbye.